What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome to the Sanders Report. Happy early Thanksgiving to everybody. So, today I wanted to talk about Thomas Matthew Crooks, the failed Trump assassin that tried to kill President Trump while he was on the campaign trail in Butler, Pennsylvania. I bring this up because I just watched the special that Tucker Carlson did, and it's really good. I suggest everybody go check it out. But, when this happened, of course, I'm always questioning anything that happens big in the political sphere because, what's the agenda? What's the real story? Is there a cover up? What's the motive? I tried to take this story at face value. But with the recent Charlie Kirk assassination, it made me go back to this and rethink everything that kind of went into it. And the Tucker Carlson special is really good. And I've kind of got a different theory that I'm putting together based loosely on just some of the things going on, but I just want to see if anybody else sees these ties or if I'm just, making something out of nothing. But the Tucker Carlson special really does a good job of kind of digging into who Thomas Matthew Crooks is because really we don't know a lot about this kid. And in today's age, you would think that somebody that tried to kill, the former president, now current president, but at the time biggest presidential candidate we had. So this kid tries to kill him. And then we really didn't hear a whole lot about it. It's kind of like, oh yeah, the kid killed him or tried to kill him, shot this fireman instead, and then they killed this kid even though he was able to basically get around all the Secret Service stuff himself. And really, if you think about it, it seems like there was more to it. They made it out. You had people arguing on the left and right. Was this kid a radical right-winger? Was he a liberal? What was he? And from everything that I've seen and everything that Tucker Carlson kind of covers is this kid seems like he was on the right, maybe even a white supremacist a little bit. And I'll get to that. But Tucker Carlson shows that he was posting on videos talking about wanting to kill foreigners, saying that foreigners should be executed. I think specifically it was Ilhan Omar and maybe some of the other squad members. And I don't like Ilhan Omar. I don't like her at all, but definitely calling for violence against her is, not something that we should tolerate in our society at all. And this kid is putting some pretty radical stuff online. I think a lot of people on the right tried to associate him with being on the left because he had made some post about people wearing masks and supporting government shutdowns. And really, if you think back to that time period, there were a lot of people on the right that were pushing masks and shutdowns too because they were scared. They might not admit it now, but at the time there were a lot of people on the right that also pushed for the wearing mask and being scared and getting vaccinated, and that was on both sides of it. So don't let people now that want to act like they weren't going along with that whole narrative at the time fool anybody. But one of the things that was weird about Thomas Crooks is that he had some encrypted foreign email addresses, which seems a little advanced for him. He's a young man. I mean, he could obviously be technical savvy, and a lot of younger people are much better with the internet and tech than I am. But to me, it seems a little advanced to have foreign email accounts. There was another thing. The kid was flying a drone around the site, and it just so happened to coincide with the same time that the Secret Service's counter-drone system was down. They had technical issues. So this kid just so happened to fly his drone around for 11 minutes when the Secret Service was having technical issues with their drone. So that was one red flag. The other one is the very next day, the FBI is hosing down the site where Crooks was shot. And, of course, you're going to clean up the crime scene, but it seems like there would be a little bit more investigation because there was blood and a bunch of stuff on the roof. Did they get samples of that? And the reason it's important to know if they got samples is because he was cremated just like a week or so later. And I forget the congressman that went to do an investigation is the guy from Louisiana. I think it was like the only guy that voted against releasing the Epstein files. But he actually went up there and was trying to do like an investigation himself. And he found that the body had already been cremated. And why this is important is because it's like, what's the toxicology results? Like, was the kid on drugs? Had the kid been drugged? Was he under, some sort of influence by somebody else to carry this attack out? I don't know, but it just seems weird. And maybe it's nothing, but it's similar to how they already did a bunch of construction where the Charlie Kirk assassination took place. Basically, so that crime scene has been tampered with. So now, whenever this kid goes to trial for the Charlie Kirk assassination, they can't go back and really recreate the scene because it's already been paved over and they redid a bunch of other stuff. And they said, oh, well, we need to clean up the scene. And I get that. But this is a crime scene. We're talking about an attempted assassination of a former president, current president, and also another huge political assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now, granted, I'm sure the FBI will figure this out because Kash Patel is extremely confident, unless he's too busy suing Elijah Schaffer for saying that his girlfriend is an alleged honeypot, Alexis Wilkins. So here's Kash Patel, as is Ansari on steroids, as I like to call him, because he's goofy. And this is his girlfriend, Alexis Wilkins, who's a country superstar, according to Kash Patel. And they're suing this dude, Elijah Schaffer, who's a podcaster. I'm not familiar with him, but I did notice that he's being sued because he retweeted a post of somebody who suggested that Alexis Wilkins is some type of Israeli honeypot operation to basically put Kash Patel in some sort of compromising situation. Now, the reason people are tying Alexis Wilkins in with Israel is because she does work for Prager University. Now, Prager University, the CEO, is this woman, Marissa Street. She is former IDF intelligence. She has dual citizenship as an American citizen and an Israeli citizen, and she is the head of PragerU. See, it's just, look at it. Look at her. This is kind of like Fox News, right? Like, let's get attractive women to push the propaganda, and then basically anybody will eat it up, especially dudes. Like, there's so many guys that just watch Fox News and zone out because they got the Fox sirens. I remember Jerry Doyle. Jerry Doyle was this libertarian talk radio host I used to listen to. He's great, rest in peace. But Jerry Doyle used to talk about the Fox Vixens. He's like, he'd have Fox News on his TV, and he'd be like, there's the Vixens there to, kind of hypnotize you and get you in with their lies. So that's what they do. But I want to get to what I thought was really interesting that Tucker Carlson exposed on his special about Thomas Matthew Crooks. And I talked about how Thomas Matthew Crooks had done a bunch of posts that were, pretty borderline racist, you could say, like along the lines of white supremacist type stuff. And Tucker Carlson talked about some of his interactions. He began to interact with somebody by the name of Willy Tepes. Now, Willy Tepes has been found to be associated with this man, Bjorn Leif Hjelmerud. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that name. But this guy, Willy Tepes, see, here's this is an associated, I guess, alias or something that this guy uses. But this guy starts to interact, or at least somebody using his name, using the name Willy Tepes, is interacting with Thomas Matthew Crooks online. And then at that point, he kind of goes silent. Well, this guy, we'll just call him Bjorn, he's tied in with the Nordic Resistance Movement. The Nordic Resistance Movement is a Nazi group that operates in Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, and they have international ties with other white supremacist groups. One of the other groups that they have an affiliation with is the Azov Battalion. Now, the Azov Battalion, if anybody's familiar with it, is a group that operates in Ukraine fighting against the Russians. The Azov Battalion is basically a white supremacist group that operates in Ukraine. They played a huge role in the Maidan coup in 2014. That was going back. That was one of the early conflicts and kind of coups that we assisted with carrying out in Ukraine prior to what led up to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But so the Azov Battalion has ties with this guy. This guy starts talking with Thomas Crooks online. Is there perhaps, and this is just speculation, any chance that this guy starts radicalizing Thomas Crooks into carrying out an assassination attempt on Donald Trump? I don't know, but I think it's possible. We haven't heard a whole lot about it. The FBI hasn't told us a lot. There hasn't been a lot of information come out, but it just seems like for this kid to carry out this assassination attempt, it seems like somebody needed to help him. And now, see, I think, just like I believe that there's an international communist group that wants to destabilize our country, I also believe that there's an underground white supremacist network that also would like to undermine our country. Because, see, if they can create chaos within our country, they can basically get us to, have some form of state of emergency, erode our rights, and then they want to just destroy the system, and then hopefully out of the chaos they'll be able to influence it into what they want, which is kind of what Azov and the white supremacists are doing in Ukraine right now. Now, see, the mainstream media wants to underplay the role that the white supremacists have played in the Ukraine conflict. You see, Azov, it evolved out of another Nazi group that was operating in the Ukraine in the 90s called the Patriot of Ukraine group. Now, they came from an organization that was known as the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, the OUN, which was started by this guy, Stepan Bandera. Now, I know that's not him. That's like a little statue or a bust. But Stepan Bandera, he was a nationalist Ukrainian that during World War II was fighting against Stalin. But he aligned himself with the Nazis, and they actually carried out lots of killing of Jewish people in the Ukraine. You see, Ukrainians did not like Russia because, see, like, this all goes back to when Stalin was taken over in the USSR. They basically created this famine. They took a bunch of farm equipment from the Ukrainians. A lot of the Ukrainians starved. See, Stalin had this whole plan. They were going to sell the farm equipment, buy industrial equipment. They were going to industrialize the economy. Anyway, they killed a bunch of Ukrainians. A bunch of Ukrainians starved, so Ukrainians did not like Stalin or basically the USSR that was ruling over them. So when Hitler and the Nazis start fighting against the Russians, these Ukrainian nationalists are like, yeah, enemy of my enemy is my friend. We're going to team up with these Nazis and we're going to help them out. They actually created this group, the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, called the 1st Galician, which was primarily all Ukrainian Nazis. So these Ukrainian Nazis tried to help Hitler defeat Stalin, which obviously Hitler failed. And Hitler wasn't going to support some type of Ukrainian nationalist state afterwards anyway. But again, Hitler was going to use them as well to fight against Stalin. But you've got these Nazi ties. So these are real Nazis, like for real Nazis, killed Jews, helped Hitler. And so it's so funny because you hear all the people back here that in the United States, they want to attack people as Nazis, but yet they actually are helping real Nazis in the Ukraine. And some of the white supremacist groups in the United States are going to Ukraine and were going to Ukraine over the last decade to train with the Azov Battalion to get training. They deported a couple of Americans back in 2020 that were there trying to fight. There's the Adam Waffen division here. That's where two of the guys were from. There's another white supremacist guy from the United States named Greg Johnson. He went to the Ukraine, gave a speech about white nationalism to a whole bunch of them. So there's this international group of white supremacists, and it's not getting the attention that I think it needs, especially if there's ties to Thomas Matthew Crooks. Because if white supremacists were involved in trying to assassinate Donald Trump, that needs to be exposed. That needs to come out. This needs to be taken serious. You know, and the other guy that tried to assassinate Trump, Ryan Wesley Ruth, he also went to the Ukraine. And they basically told him like he was of no assistance and he didn't get the help. But then that guy comes back here after being a big supporter of the Ukraine and wants to assassinate Trump. You know, and there's all like in the Ukraine itself, there's the Azov Battalion, the Svoboda Party, C-14, Right Sector. You know, and there's other white supremacists that have traveled to Ukraine. There's specifically a Swedish sniper, Michael Skilt. And then the mass shooter, Britton Tarrant, the guy that did the mass shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand. You know, in his manifesto, he basically talked about the Azov Battalion and support for the Ukraine. You know, like I said, this is speculation. I'm looking at a lot of circumstantial evidence and just trying to figure out what's going on or if there is anything going on, because, you know, that's a serious threat. And in the United States, you're starting to see, you know, some white supremacist stuff. You see a lot of young men that are, you know, getting into this. And Tucker talked to Nick Fuentes not long ago, which is good because, see, you need to talk to people like Nick Fuentes because that's where we can kind of show the difference between people that are America first because we're only concerned with American interest, and then people that are American first that also have, you know, white supremacist type views, because that doesn't allow them to kind of stigmatize us and put us in that same group. You see, somebody can point to Nick Fuentes and then say, oh, see, anybody that's saying America first, what they're really saying is they want white supremacy. No, we care about American interest for American people, all Americans, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Jewish, whatever. We don't do the identity politics thing. We're only concerned about American citizens. That's not racist. But when they can try to lump you in with people and point to people like Nick Fuentes and other people that are saying kind of these off the wall, you know, identity politics type divisive things, we can say no. And the more people like Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith and people that will engage Nick Fuentes, we can kind of put up that line and say, no, this is where he is, this is where we are. You know, yes, if you put up a Venn diagram, there's going to be some things where there's going to be some views that I have that overlap with things that Nick Fuentes says. But that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he says. So that's why we need to call out and put a spotlight on the real white supremacists, on the real Nazis. That way they can't try to lump us all together.